Hey everyone, and welcome to Clayshare Live today. Jess is out of town, so tonight you get me introducing a pre-recorded video that she did for the CCSA conference where she's going to teach you how to make and use Underglaze transfers. So if you've ever wanted to make your own, or if you want some additional tips on using pre-made ones, stay tuned and we're going to get this going. Let me get it queued up real quick.
Hi everyone, I'm Jessica Putnam Phillips of Clayshare, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Underglaze decals, also sometimes called Underglaze transfers. So I'm actually going to show you how to make your own Underglaze transfers, and I'm going to talk to you why you might want to do this and how this can work for you in your business. There's a lot of uses for hand-painted transfers, and I think you can kind of see where this is going. You know, if one of your customers comes in and they hand paint a design and then they put it on a plate, their family's going to love that, right? That's a beautiful keepsake. So I'm going to show you a really simple method that can be used to teach your customers how to make their own transfers. And then I'm also going to show you some commercial underglaze transfers. And usually when you're buying commercial underglaze transfers, they're referred to as underglaze decals. So don't be confused. The word underglaze is the important part because they are made from underglaze. So just keep in mind, the commercial ones are usually called underglaze decals. When you make them yourself, they're transfers. And the commercial ones are done where you have a pattern and it's screen printed with underglaze onto a sheet of paper, usually a rice paper, and then you take these and you apply them to the pottery either when you're making it and it's leather hard, or after it's been bisque fired and then you put glaze on top. So that's how I did this one here, and then this one as well. And this one is also done with commercial decals. Now, over here I have one I made myself using a stencil. So you can make your own underglaze transfers with stencils and you don't have to just free paint them. And then this is a magnet my daughter made. She actually hand painted the design and then I turned it into a little keepsake magnet that I have forever and ever. And we'll talk a bit about using that as well. All right, so I think you're gonna love underglaze decals and underglaze transfers. I think it's going to open up a whole world of possibilities for you and your business, and I can't wait to share what I know about them with you all. All right, so here are the tools and materials I'm going to be using. This is really a two-part tutorial because I'm going to show you how to make your own underglaze transfer right here using newsprint. So you'll need some newsprint. You'll need some underglaze. Any company brand underglaze you like, you can use. I usually use Speedball, but Amico and Mako are equally good, so you can use them. You'll need a brush. I like these Chinese calligraphy brushes. They're also sometimes called Sumi, S-U-M-I. Actually, Sumi is the correct name for them. And these are really great brushes. And then I also love these little needle point bottles for applying underglaze. Now I know Mako has their designer liner. You could be using those and that would work fabulous for this. So that's for the making your own underglaze, and a pair of scissors is handy for cutting things up. It's for making your own underglaze transfers, which is what I did on this little magnet here, and these here are homemade underglaze transfers, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Now, if you don't think you're going to do that, and I'll show you why you might want to do that and why that could be really fabulous for your business. If you're going to do commercial underglaze decals or underglaze transfers, I have these here from Sandbow Studios. They are ChinaClayArt.com. The reason I use them is because I designed for them. So this is one of my own designs. It's called Scandi Birds, Scandinavian Birds, and here it is finished on a plate. So this was just a slab plate made with a GR pottery form. Some of you might be familiar with GR pottery forms, but this is a really great make and take class that you can do, this little hexagon plate right here. And I used this underglaze transfer, as you can tell, for my design. And so if you're going to do that, you'll need commercial underglaze decals. And then you can decide whether you want to make the plate from a wet slab So if you're going to be teaching how to make it, or you're going to have students coming in and they want to make their own pottery from a wet slab, you'll need to have your wet slab. And if you're going to make a plate using GR pottery forms, you'll need the GR pottery form sizes that you want to use. Or if you watch my mug tutorial, you could use the transfer on the mug slab. When we roll the slab out before we put texture in it, you could put the transfer on it, and you could do it that way. Or the other option is if you have bisqueware. So you could have a piece of bisqueware they pick out, and then you can use these underglaze transfers on bisqueware. Now mind you, if you're going to make your own underglaze transfers, you're not going to be able to use those on bisqueware. Homemade underglaze transfers will only work on wet clay. So just keep that in mind when you're working. You cannot use them on bisqueware. They won't work. It's just how the process is. So you want to have a little rib. I like these little red flexible ribs for smoothing out your underglaze transfer, underglaze decal, sponge, and then a bucket of clean water, and of course some clay. So I think I've gone over everything. Let's get started. First I'm going to teach you how to make your own underglaze transfer and talk about why you want to do that. And then we'll move on to using commercial underglaze transfers or underglaze decals. I'm going to show you how to make your own underglaze decals. Now you can also think of these as a mono print. So this would be the same as mono printing on clay, and that basically means mono, one print. So what you're doing is you're painting or stamping, this was stamped, a design on the surface of paper. This paper here is newsprint, and then once it's dried you'll be able to transfer it onto pottery. And what's wonderful about these is when you hand paint them, just imagine if you have an 8-year-old child come in and they paint this beautiful abstract painting, and then you take that and you put it on a piece of pottery. That's going to be a keepsake forever. So this is a wonderful way to run a children's class. You have them come in, you have them make their own underglaze transfers, you have them all put it on a plate. You know, you can make a little plate like this. This is one I did, but I used a stencil. Have them make a gorgeous little plate, and then they take that plate home. You know, when it's done you have to biscuit, glaze it, and fire it, but still they end up with this gorgeous keepsake from their painting, right? And if they don't do anything large, you know, you can always cut it up and use it to make a little magnet like this one here. So I'm going to show you 2 ways to do this, and all you need is newsprint. This is really an expensive newsprint. You cannot use newspaper, you have to use newsprint. You may be able to use rice paper. Some rice papers will work for this, some will not. So you try them out. Newsprint is nice and thick, so you can really saturate it with lots and lots of color. So you're going to tear off a sheet of the newsprint. And I like this size. It's really easy to work with. You can get larger pads of newsprint if you want, but this is a good size right here. All right, so the first one I'm going to show you is what you want to do is you want to put down a drawing. And I usually do a black underglaze drawing first, but you could use any darker color underglaze you want. Now keep in mind, this is a transfer. So the first color on this paper is going to be the color on the surface of the pottery. Does that make sense to you all, what I'm saying there? So if you look at this, the black was put on first, and then all of the other colors were put on after. So, you know, if you're going to have, you know, and not just children love to do this, adults do. I love doing this. So I'm just going to do a really abstract floral, and I'm using this bottle. Now, sometimes these underglaze bottles like to clog up, and I don't have any of the designer liner series, but if you have those work really, really well for this. And so I'm just going to make my outline first. And I'm using flowers because I like flowers, but you could do any design you want. So you just draw whatever you want on there. Now, if you don't want to use these bottles, you could just go ahead and use your underglaze, but you're going to do your black drawing first. So you're going to put your black line down first. Let me just tear off another piece. So if you're not going to use the bottles and you just want to go ahead and use a paintbrush, I love these Sumi brushes because you can get a really, really fine point. If your underglaze is too thick, you can just thin it down. You want the consistency of, I would say ink. Ink consistency is good, but look, you can do a really nice brush abstract. So, you know, if you have kids coming in, you can just let them draw all they want with the brushes. And they can make really cute patterns. So I'm just doing this really abstract flower. And then their painting can be turned into a mug or a plate or magnets or whatever. And you don't even have to do anything representational. It can be completely abstract like this is here. The bigger sheet of this was just almost like stained glass. I can quickly do one. Here, I think we have time. All right, I'm gonna do it. If we run out of time, this part will get edited, so I have to talk fast. All right, so I have my newsprint, and never mind, I made a mess on that corner. Don't worry about that. And so you can just have this really abstract stained glass looking thing happening here. And then you can have everybody fill in each one of these little triangles with a different color. And I like the triangle because everybody can draw a triangle. So you kind of have this, I know it looks like a mess, but believe it or not, when it's finished, it's really lovely. So that's your black and white, which creates your drawing. So let me grab some I've already done. So you'll let that dry all the way. And here's one I did with the bottle. And you can see just some examples of a pattern that's just some swirls, right? That's just some swirls. I'm dripping this everywhere. That's just, and I got it on my newsprint. I got another one, hold on. So I just did some swirls, and then if you want to go ahead and do something more representational, you can do that. So once you have your black and white, let me grab one that's half done. You're going to add your color. Look, this is real life, everyone. Sometimes you make a mess when you're working. So once your black line work has dried all the way, you're going to want to go in and add your color. And so for these, I used a little bit of chartreuse green for the leaves. And then I used pink and melon for the background. And so I'll just go in. And I've got a bunch of these brushes on hand so that I can do any color I want. And so you just go in, and you don't have to fill in every line. You can be very loose with this. I really like the look when you go outside the lines. And so I'll get my leaf color on, and then when that's done, I'll come in and I'll do my background color. I think this one's pink. Is that what I got here? No, this is melon from Speedball. Melon is a really beautiful color. And so if it's too thick, just add some water, thin it down. You can use a palette, or sometimes I just put water on the brush. I'm just filling in. Trying not to overlap too much, but if it happens, it's okay. It will not hurt it. The one key you want to do is you want to make sure the black lines are dried, because if they're not dried, when you start adding your color to it, you're going to smear the black lines. So I think now we're going to add some pink. And the pink and melon are really close to each other, so they blend nicely. I like using them together. And the other color on here for the flowers is turquoise, and then I just use yellow for the inside of the flower. So there we have it, and you can see this half's dry already. I did that a few days ago. This half has to dry, and I still have to finish these leaves with chartreuse, but that's really not a big deal. And so you see how fun this could be for, you know, kids, and honestly for adults. I see this as a great project because when my children were little, I used to love every single thing they brought home that had a drawing they made on it, especially when it was something like a magnet or a keepsake that I could have forever. So something that could be a plate or a mug would be a treasure for me, an absolute treasure, and I think it would for any parent out there. So once you have these made, they need to dry. You don't actually use them until they're dry all the way. And I know that's crazy sounding, but that's how the process works. All right, so once you have them, you want to put them on the clay. And remember, this process has to go on wet clay. You cannot put it on bisqueware. It just doesn't work. If you want to do on bisqueware, you will use commercial decals or commercial underglaze transfers. So when your underglaze transfer is dried, it's going to lighten in color, and you can tell this side is wet, this side is dry. So you're going to let this set up till it's dry all the way. And the great thing about these is they can be made in one session, and then you can dry them and store them for basically ever. You know, some of these I've made over a year ago, and they're still perfect and great to work with. So when you want to use these, because they're now dry, there's not enough moisture in the clay to pull out the color. So we have to basically charge them. And in order to do that, you'll want to use either white slip or white underglaze. So you just shake it up, and you're just going to slather the underglaze transfer with it. So just slap it on there. And don't worry about going too thick. You really, really can't. You need this to be nice and wet. Move that over there. You need this to be nice and wet for it to pull the color. Because what you're trying to do is you're moistening the color up again so that it will release from the paper and transfer onto the clay. And the white is actually going to be up against the clay. So you could use any color clay you want. The white background we're creating, if you have earthenware or a terracotta, a dark clay or a brown clay, your pattern's still going to show because we're putting this white background on it. Actually, I really love this technique when you put it on a dark clay. It just looks fabulous. So you need to let these set for a little bit after you charge them. And what I like to do, as you see, I already cut my paper down. I took my mug template, so if you haven't seen my hand building a mug with texture class, that's going to be here on CCSA. And I also have one on clayshare.com. So what you do is when you make your mug template, you just cut your sheet, and imagine that they're perfect. So that's the perfect size. I already cut my sheet up to match my template. And this is what I would do if I was making a plate. So say, and I'll show you in the next step when we use commercial decals how to make a plate with GR pottery forms, but you're going to cut your decal to the shape of the plate. So we'll do that in the next part. So we're jumping the gun a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead, and I'm actually going to cut out my mug, right? So you could have your student make their little design, right? They can paint their design, and then they can make a mug and put it on a mug. Now I do want to caution you not to let them write words or names on it because everything will be backwards. So if they are going to write things on it, they need to keep in mind that it will reverse. So they will need to write it backwards for it to be correct, because when we transfer it, we flip it over. So I'm just cutting the top and bottom, and then I'm going to bevel the sides and cut the sides. This is just exactly how I make hand-built mugs. So now we have the clay cut to the size we need. And we're going to take our underglaze transfer here, and I'm just going to flip it right up onto our clay. And don't worry if it isn't lined up perfectly the first time. You get a few seconds to release. There. So do you see how you're already seeing the design show through? That's because the moisture is working and it's starting to pull everything out. So I'm just going to very lightly smooth this on to get out any air bubbles that are in here. And really press it down. You can always check your progress too, and you can peel it up and look and see. Now do you see how some of it's peeling away? It's not wet enough. You need to push that back down. So often I will do this, and you'll have to let them set for a little bit. See, this area is dry. I can tell that that hasn't transferred yet. All right, now I'm going to take a damp sponge and I'm just going to get this wet because I want the underglaze color to release from the paper. And so we're just tapping a damp sponge. You can see why doing something like a little magnet would be nice for younger students because there's not so much involved. It's a little simpler. You can also have them use commercial stamps like rubber stamps and stamp underglaze on a sheet and then just use those. So if they don't want to draw, they don't have to. So let's see where we're at. More is definitely coming off. Now, sometimes what I will do is I'll actually leave this on and I'll roll the cup up. Yeah, it's got to sit a little longer. So we're going to let this set, and I'm going to go ahead and I'll roll this up and we'll take a look at this later, but we're going to move on to using commercial decals. All right, I just wanted to add a little quick tip. If you're having difficulty getting the transfer to come off the paper, after you get it wet and pounce it with a sponge, use a rib like this yellow one here and really press it in, and you'll see that this makes all the difference. So now when I peel it up, look at how much is transferring. I think the whole thing is. I'm going to leave this on there though because I want to roll it up with the paper on so I don't disturb my pattern. But if you're having a hard time getting this to transfer, smooth it with one of these ribs and that'll help it. Now I'm going to show you how to use commercial underglaze decals, also called Glaze Transfers. Here's some I used on a really lovely large platter made with GR Pottery forms. And that was made on a piece, and then I formed the piece. So I put the decal on first. So these right here are from China Clay Art. That's their website, chinaclayart.com, and it's Sandbow Studios. And they have different sizes. You can get these smaller sheets, or you can get these great big large sheets. So if you're going to do big platters, you can get great big sheets from them. You can also buy the big sheets and cut them down, which is what I have done to get more out of it. So to use these, they can go on leather hard pottery, they can go on completely bone dry pottery, they can go on bisqueware. So either or. And I'm going to show you how to put it on bisqueware first. So you just take the piece that you want to put it on. Now this works best on surfaces that are flat or curved, but not necessarily have a lot of volume to it, and do not have texture. If there's texture on it, it can be a little difficult. So for something like this one right here, what I'm going to do is, I don't want to waste any of this material, so I'm going to take in my little planter. This is a class I have on ClayShare on how to make this planter from slabs. Super fun little class. It's actually my circle slab vase class, but we also show how to make a piece for the wall. So I'm tracing out the design because I don't want to cut any more than I have to. So now I'm going to cut out my Glaze transfer. And what I love about these is you can actually cut little bits and put multiple patterns on one piece, almost like making a quilt. And I do that a lot. Because you often have scraps and you don't want to waste them, right? You want to get every bit out of those. There. Okay. So that's going to fit on the top. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay this down, line it up, hold it there, then take some clean water and just press it. So I did put, I don't know if you noticed, when you look at your Underglaze decal, one side's duller, one side's brighter. The brighter side has the underglaze on it. That's the side you want to lay down onto your bisqueware. Must apologize, my table is a little warped, so everything rocks on it. So you just keep getting this wet and pouncing it, and you can check it to see if things are starting to come up. And you got to be careful because your hands will try to stick to it as well. Let's see how we're doing. Sometimes you have to get it really, really wet, but that's okay. So what happens is when we're getting these wet, we're recharging that underglaze so that it will transfer from the paper it's on to the bisqueware. And the bisqueware is very porous and very dry, very thirsty. So you sometimes need a lot of water to transfer it. But you don't want to be scrubbing, you really want to be pouncing, because you don't want to smear. If you scrub, you risk smearing. All right, let's take a peek. See where we're at. Oh, we've got transfer. All right, I think we're good. I'm just going to pounce once more over the whole thing. Now you might end up with an area that didn't transfer perfectly. I believe that's part of the charm of this. It gives it a vintage quality. But with time and practice, you can get perfect at this. But what I love about these is you can have a customer come in and want to decorate something that you have there on the shelf, and they can go ahead and they can pick the pattern out and make it more personalized. Look at this. How sweet is this going to be? Oh my goodness. I just love it. Look at that. There. I think it's the cutest little thing. And you could use any pattern that you like. So that's how I would apply it to bisqueware. Now, if I want to do the sides, I would take this right here and I would cut a strip from this, and I would just wrap it around the entire piece, and I would do the sides, which I will probably do the sides later. But you could easily do the sides as well. Or have them paint a solid yellow like I did here. Let me show you. Let me move that out of the way. On this here, I decided I wanted to do the rim in yellow because I didn't want to use more of the Underglaze decal. So you can paint the rim or paint the side that pretty yellow, paint the back yellow, and then just put a clear glaze on top, and it'll be perfect. Now just be aware that you can't brush your clear glaze back and forth multiple times because it'll smear this. So what I suggest you do is you brush it on one layer, let it dry. If you need to do a second layer, brush on again, but let this be dry first. Now I'm going to show you how to use it on wet clay, and I find GR pottery forms make this a breeze. So what I like to do is I always have sets of these. You know, when you buy these, you can get these stackable sets, right? And I like to take two that stack together. The big one can be your template, and the small one can be the actual one you're going to drape with. Although you can use the bigger one if you want to make a plate with. It's entirely up to you. So we're going to do, I'm thinking we're going to do these blue mushrooms. So I've got a slab of clay rolled out till it's about 1/4 of an inch thick. I'll set that off to the side. I'm going to use this square here, and it's slightly larger than the Underglaze decal, but that's not a problem because I'm going to put a border on the Underglaze decal. We'll hide any area that doesn't have pattern. But if you use the larger sheet, like this sheet here, I mean, look how big this sheet is. You could make the largest platter you could possibly ever want to make. So you can get these Underglaze transfers, Underglaze decals in any size you want. So you're not limited at all. Okay, so there we have our Underglaze decal cut out. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut out my little slab. I'm just going to use my clay knife. This is a class you can teach anybody how to make. Roll out a slab, cut around a GR pottery form, right? Anybody can do that. Cut out your Underglaze decal to the size you need. Move these little guys off there. Now, I'm going to take the Underglaze decal and we're going to line it up as best as we can. on our clay slab. Just lightly. I'm going to move it up a tiny bit. There. Then, make sure it's nice and smooth. I'm going to use a rib. Any rib that you have will work. I'm using this red rib, and I'm just going to smooth this on. And I want you to see how fast the color changes. It's going to get nice and dark. So we're just going to smooth this on. We don't need to add water to this. When we're doing the Underglaze decals on bisqueware, we have to use water because there's no water in the clay. But this clay is wet. Look at the color difference. I'm just going to show you. Here's a sheet, and here it is saturated. So once you start seeing them turn color, you know that they're good to go. There. So we can just do a test to see if that's actually going to come off. Look at that. Perfect, perfect. Now, I like to take the paper off before I use the GR pottery forms. You don't have to if you don't want to. I feel like the results are better, but it's up to you. So let's just pull this off. Look at that perfect blue mushroom plate. So wonderful. Now I'm just going to release this, and I'm going to take my GR pottery form. I'm just going to line it up approximately in the center. Now, I have extra boards because in my studio I'm always working on something. So let me grab a board, and we're just going to flip the entire thing. So we just flip it like that. And then I'm going to use this yellow rib to smooth down my plate. So we're going to have made this really, really cute little mushroom plate. And I have a little trick for the edges. So sometimes these will shift. Even though we made a template using the larger size GR pottery form, sometimes they will shift. It just happens. And so what I like to do, because I don't want to have an uneven edge, and I know my students don't want an uneven edge either. Let me just wipe off the back. So any place that you have any smears or anything, go ahead and wipe that off. So I'm going to use a 1/4 inch thick strip of wood, and I just put it up against the edge, and then I just cut it. And that gives me a perfect edge all the way around every time. So we're just going to cut this, and then I'll turn it over and you can see our plate. Now with GR pottery forms, sometimes they have to sit. You can't remove the form right away. But sometimes we all get a little impatient, so, or you have students that need to leave because they have, places to go. They have things they got to go do. Take that off. You ready? Let's see if it'll come right out. Look at that. Sometimes you get a little blue smudging on the inside of your GR pottery form, but it's not smudged here. So just wipe your forms down and just, let them dry. So here we have our plate. It could have sat a little while, just could have sat for a tiny bit, but there it is. And what I will do is I will take a blue underglaze and I'll just paint that on the very edge, and that'll be finished. All right, so there we have it. So many ways to use underglaze transfers. I showed you how to make your own underglaze transfers, which is also considered a monoprint transfer. And we use that to make a plate. I made a plate. I didn't show you how to make a plate, but you get how I make a plate, right? We did do the mug, and I didn't peel it off yet because I wanted to show you. So I wanted to do the big reveal. So this is a homemade transfer. Look at that color. Look how beautiful that is. And that was just from a painting I did. I used that little bottle to do the drawing of the flowers first, and then I did the underglaze color. And so now this piece here needs to have a bottom put on it, right? Smooth the rim out, put a handle on, and we got a cute mug. So you can see how fabulous that could be for your students. They would love making their own mugs, especially with their own paintings on it, right? Just don't put words on it unless you write them backwards, because when you transfer them, they'll read backwards. So we did that, and then I showed you how to use commercially available Underglaze transfers, which are also called Underglaze Decals. Don't be confused, they're the same thing. And we did this on bisqueware. Remember, on bisqueware you have to pounce with a lot of water. And the great thing about this is you probably have tons of bisqueware available already for your students, and they can go ahead and pick out a pattern, so you can order a whole bunch of different patterns, and then they can personalize it themselves, and it really can be lovely. So that's that one. And then, as a bonus, I actually showed you how to make a plate. We used the Underglaze transfer, we put it on the slab, and then we draped it over a GR pottery form, and we made a cute little plate. I mean, that's something that took me like maybe 5 minutes to do. So you know your students, it'll take a little longer, but they're going to have so much fun making them, and when it's all said and done, they're going to have a plate they made themselves. All right, I hope you have enjoyed this lesson on using Underglaze decals and Underglaze transfers. So I really think having your customers come in and make their own Underglaze transfers is a really fun project, and then they can get something so meaningful, such a keepsake out of it, like this mug here, or, you know, Underglaze decals that are commercially made are just as lovely as well. All right, everyone, I'm Jessica Putnam Phillips from ClayShare. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time in the studio.
All right, thanks everyone for tuning in. As I said before, Jess is out of town, so we couldn't do a live tutorial, so we brought out that one that she did for CCSA last year, I believe. There was a lot of good stuff in there about using Underglaze decals, especially on bisque. We don't do bisque very often, but thanks for tuning in. We should have Jess back in time for ClayShare Live next week, and for all of our premium members, I'll be back at 6:15 for prime time, and we're going to be going over a ton of stuff on using the apps. Oh, no sound. Maybe it came back. Anyway, Jess was out of town. We'll see you guys at 6:15. We're going to be going over clayshare.com, the apps for both tablets, phones, TVs, everything. So come with your questions. I've got a ton of stuff I'm going to cover, and we will see you then. Bye, everyone.